A quiet road at night can feel almost peaceful. The glow of streetlight stretches across the pavement, the hum of the engine becomes background noise, and your mind drifts into that calm, automatic rhythm that comes with driving somewhere familiar. For most people, a routine drive feels uneventful, just another ordinary moment in an ordinary day. Then suddenly, in the rearview mirror, you see flashing red and blue lights. Your hands tighten slightly on the steering wheel. Your attention sharpens. Maybe your heart beats a little faster. You check your speed, glance at the mirrors, and begin pulling safely to the side of the road. In that moment, what you expect is usually simple. The officer approaches your window, asks for your license and registration, maybe explains why you were stopped, and within a few minutes, you're either given a warning or a ticket. Then you drive away, and the moment becomes another small story you might tell later. But what many drivers don't realize is that hidden inside these seemingly routine encounters are legal rules that can dramatically change the situation, rules that most people never hear about, rules that can transform what started as a simple traffic stop into something far more serious. In rare but very real situations, a moment during a traffic stop can escalate in ways that suddenly expose someone to felony charges, not because they intended to commit a serious crime, not because they planned to break the law, but because they unknowingly crossed a legal boundary that most drivers never knew existed. And that raises an interesting question. If you were pulled over tonight, do you think you would know exactly where those legal boundaries are? Would you know what actions during a traffic stop could quietly shift the situation from a routine citation into a potential criminal investigation? Take a moment and think about that. If you've ever been pulled over by police, what was the experience like for you? What did the officer ask first? Did you feel confident about your rights and responsibilities, or did the situation feel uncertain? If you're comfortable sharing, you can leave a comment about your experience. These real-world stories often reveal just how confusing traffic stop interactions can be for ordinary drivers. Because the truth is that traffic stops are one of the most common interactions between citizens and law enforcement. Millions happen every year across the United States. Most of them end peacefully within minutes. But every once in a while, something happens during that interaction that triggers a much more serious legal situation. And often it revolves around a rule that most people have never heard explained clearly. To understand this hidden rule, it helps to start with a simple question. What exactly is a traffic stop in the eyes of the law? Legally speaking, a traffic stop is not just a casual conversation between a driver and a police officer. It is considered a temporary investigative detention. That means the officer has the legal authority to briefly stop a vehicle when they have reasonable suspicion that a traffic law has been violated. Reasonable suspicion is an important concept in constitutional law. It means the officer must have a specific, objective reason to believe that a violation has occurred. That reason could be something minor, like a broken taillight, drifting across a lane line, or driving above the speed limit. Once the vehicle is stopped, the officer is legally allowed to ask for identification and basic documents related to the vehicle and the driver. These typically include a driver's license, vehicle registration, and proof of insurance. The purpose of the stop is limited. The officer is supposed to address the reason for the traffic violation and ensure the driver is legally operating the vehicle. But within that framework lies a set of legal expectations that many drivers never fully understand. One of those expectations involves compliance with lawful commands during the stop. During a traffic stop, officers may give certain instructions intended to ensure safety and control of the situation. For example, they might ask the driver to keep their hands visible, remain in the vehicle, or step out of the car. Many people are surprised to learn that courts have consistently ruled that officers can legally ask drivers and passengers to exit a vehicle during a traffic stop. This authority was confirmed in several major Supreme Court decisions, including cases such as Pennsylvania v. Mims and Maryland v. Wilson. The reasoning behind these rulings is centered on officer safety. Traffic stops occur on roadsides where visibility, traffic flow, and unpredictable behavior can create dangerous conditions. Allowing officers to control where occupants stand during the stop helps reduce potential risks. Most drivers comply without hesitation, but occasionally misunderstandings occur. A driver might refuse to exit the vehicle, believing they are asserting their rights. Another driver might attempt to drive away before the stop has officially concluded, and this is where that hidden rule begins to emerge, because once a lawful traffic stop begins, leaving the scene without permission can be interpreted very differently by the law. In some jurisdictions, driving away during an active stop may be treated as attempting to evade law enforcement. If the situation escalates or involves dangerous behavior, that action can sometimes lead to felony charges. Now, it's important to pause here and clarify something. Not every misunderstanding during a traffic stop results in severe legal consequences. In fact, most interactions remain calm and routine, but legal cases over the years have demonstrated how quickly situations can escalate when certain boundaries are crossed. Consider a real-world example that has appeared in court records and legal analyses. A driver is pulled over for a minor traffic violation late at night. The officer approaches the vehicle and begins asking routine questions. During the interaction, the officer asks the driver to step out of the car. The driver, feeling uncomfortable and uncertain about the request, refuses. The situation becomes tense. Voices raise slightly. Traffic continues rushing past on the highway shoulder. Eventually, the driver suddenly accelerates and attempts to leave the scene. At that moment, the legal context changes. What began as a minor traffic stop now becomes a potential fleeing or eluding case. In several states, fleeing law enforcement in a vehicle can qualify as a felony, particularly if the act creates danger to others. This legal transformation can happen in a matter of seconds. A situation that started with a simple traffic ticket now carries far more serious legal implications. But here's the part that many legal experts emphasize when discussing these cases. Often, the driver did not intend to commit a serious crime. They may have felt confused, anxious, or fearful. They may have misunderstood their legal obligations. Yet the law evaluates actions based on behavior, not just intentions. And this is where understanding the rules of a traffic stop becomes critically important. Another scenario where the hidden rule appears involves the concept of obstruction. During a lawful investigation, interfering with an officer's duties can sometimes be interpreted as obstruction of justice. Obstruction laws vary by state, but generally they apply when someone intentionally interferes with law enforcement performing official duties. This does not mean simply asking questions or asserting legal rights. Courts have repeatedly affirmed that citizens can ask officers to clarify instructions or explain the reason for a stop. However, physical interference, aggressive behavior, or deliberate attempts to prevent an officer from conducting the stop can create legal complications. And once again, actions that escalate the situation may elevate what began as a minor encounter. Another legal principle worth understanding involves the concept of probable cause. If during a traffic stop an officer observes evidence suggesting a more serious crime, the scope of the stop can expand. For example, the smell of alcohol might lead to a DUI investigation. Visible contraband could lead to further questioning. An outstanding warrant discovered during a license check could lead to an arrest. Traffic stops are often described by legal scholars as gateways in law enforcement, not because they are designed to trap drivers, but because they create opportunities for officers to identify other violations that might otherwise go unnoticed. This reality has been discussed in numerous court cases and legal debates over the past several decades. But even within these situations, the key factor remains behavior during the stop. Courts often examine how both the officer and the driver behaved during the encounter. Did the officer have a lawful reason for the stop? Were the commands given reasonable and related to safety? Did the driver comply with lawful instructions? Did the situation escalate due to misunderstanding or deliberate resistance? These questions become central in legal proceedings when disputes arise. Another lesser-known aspect of traffic stop law involves timing. Courts have ruled that a traffic stop should not be extended longer than necessary to address the original reason for the stop unless new reasonable suspicion emerges. This principle was highlighted in a well-known Supreme Court case called Rodriguez v. United States. In that case, the court determined that prolonging a traffic stop for unrelated investigative purposes without reasonable suspicion violates the Fourth Amendment. This ruling reinforced an important balance between law enforcement authority and individual rights. Officers can conduct necessary tasks related to the stop, but they cannot extend the detention indefinitely without justification. For drivers, understanding this balance can be empowering. Knowing that the law places limits on traffic stops can help people remain calm and informed during interactions with police. At the same time, it is equally important to recognize the boundaries that apply to drivers. Traffic stops are structured legal encounters with specific expectations on both sides. The hidden rule that sometimes transforms these encounters into serious legal situations often comes down to this simple idea. Once a lawful stop begins, certain actions that might seem minor can have major legal consequences. Leaving the scene prematurely, refusing lawful safety instructions, interfering with the officer's investigation. These behaviors can unintentionally shift the legal framework surrounding the stop. And yet, most of these situations can be avoided through calm, clear communication and understanding. Legal experts frequently advise that during a traffic stop, drivers should focus on maintaining composure and responding respectfully to lawful instructions. If there are disagreements about the legality of the stop or the officer's conduct, those issues are typically resolved later through legal channels, not on the roadside. This approach protects both the driver and the officer from unnecessary escalation, because the roadside is rarely the best place to resolve complex legal disputes. Instead, courts exist specifically to examine those questions in a structured environment where evidence, testimony, and legal arguments can be carefully evaluated. Reflecting on these ideas, it becomes clear that traffic stops are far more than routine moments on the road. They are structured legal interactions shaped by decades of constitutional law, court decisions, and public safety concerns. Understanding the hidden rules that govern them can make an enormous difference in how these encounters unfold. And perhaps the most important lesson is that knowledge reduces uncertainty. When people understand the legal framework surrounding traffic stops, they are less likely to panic, misunderstand instructions, or unintentionally escalate the situation. So the next time you see flashing lights in your rearview mirror, take a moment to remember that what happens next is guided by a set of legal principles designed to balance safety, authority, and individual rights. Staying calm, understanding the rules, and responding thoughtfully can help ensure that what begins as a routine stop remains exactly that. A brief moment on the roadside, followed by a safe return to the road ahead. And now it's worth returning to the question we asked earlier. Before hearing this explanation, were you aware that certain actions during a traffic stop could potentially transform a minor situation into something much more serious? Have you ever experienced a traffic stop that felt confusing or tense? Your perspective matters, and conversations like these help people better understand how the law works in everyday situations. If you have thoughts or experiences related to traffic stops, feel free to share them in the comments. Because the more we talk about these real-world legal interactions, the more prepared everyone becomes when those flashing lights appear unexpectedly in the mirror. And sometimes, a little knowledge about the hidden rules of the road can make all the difference.